Hearts of Iron 4 is a great game in many ways. I've started playing it back in 2018, if memory serves right. It was the time of Death or Dishonor expansion, and I've put about 2000 hours into the game so far. Lately I've been playing it less, but that's why I'm making this video. So what is Hearts of Iron 4? It's a grand strategy game, set in World War II, with a lot of cool things in it. Now it's my first grand strategy game that I ever played, so it holds a special place in my own heart, I guess. But outside of that, you can't deny the coolness of being able to play any country on the planet in the time of 1936. There's a lot of tanks, there's a lot of warfare both in the air, sea and land, and it's just cool because of that, at least in my opinion. I can't really think of any other game that lets you wage war on a scale Hearts of Iron 4 lets you. You're dealing in global conflict. You control a navy, an air force, and a land army. You also have full control of both civilian and military industry of the country you're playing as. But unfortunately, as time went on, I have to say that my feelings about the game have changed a lot. Now I've played a lot of the game's single player, but the vast majority was multiplayer. And from my experiences with how Paradox Interactive, the developer of Hearts of Iron 4, dealt with the game itself, both in its expansions and generally the way it was developed, I can't help but feel unhappy with how things are right now. But to understand what's wrong with Hearts of Iron 4 in my opinion, you need to look at the main groups of players that play the game. Now, I would like to say that there's three main groups, and those are people that only play single player, people that play both single player and multiplayer but are mostly casual players, and the final group, which I'm not really sure how big it is, but it is very vocal. It's the group that plays historical multiplayer games. The people that play single player only play the game mostly for fun. There's also role-playing value in single player itself because you can pause at any moment and appreciate what you're seeing on the screen. You can go into full depths of how the game mechanics work and investigate them, and take as much time as you need doing that. But the game has a multiplayer component to it, and the second group I mentioned, the people that play both SP and MP, they're mostly there to have fun, to play as what they're called meme games in the community, and to mess around with friends. These multiplayer games are usually not that big and don't have big rule books about what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. And then we have historical multiplayer. Now, I believe it is probably the biggest multiplayer community for Hearts of Iron 4, but it's mostly guesswork. Historical multiplayer is focused on, well, the best way to describe it, I guess, would be LARPing. There's vast rulebooks explaining exactly what you can and cannot do, and the game is focused on the competitive aspect. So there's a meta that you follow, and you're not really allowed to deviate from it. I've played a lot of this type of games, so a lot of historical multiplayer games, and I've enjoyed them at first, but after around 500 or so hours into them, I started getting tired of how every game felt the same. There's not much new to be experienced outside of direct conflict in gameplay itself. The idea is that you're gonna have as much fun as skilled you are, I guess. But there's also the fact that a lot of these communities for historical multiplayer are very elitist. And what I mean by that is most of the communities that play these types of games have extensive instructions on what you're allowed to play and not. And what I mean by that is your skill is measured in the amount of hours you have put into the game. And depending on your skill, or the amount of hours you've put into the game, you're allowed to play certain countries. So those who would be considered noobs, who have less than, let's say, 50 or 100 hours, they're allowed to only play minor countries, countries that don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Those who have more hours and are more established in the community are considered reliable players. And they can play as major countries, countries like Germany, France, UK, or whatever. But this unfortunately makes it really unwelcoming to new players. Also, there's a bad trend of these communities being pretty toxic, is one way to put it. Anyways, to return back on track, I wanted to talk about the problems of Hoi 4 itself. I believe Paradox is really mismanaging this game, and with every new expansion, it feels like it's one step forwards and two steps back. The most obvious problem, in my opinion, is the performance. The game, just like many other Paradox titles, has a big problem of late game performance. I mean, the game is downright unplayable after reaching certain years. Now, if you have a beast PC, and if you're playing single player, that's okay, in the sense that you're gonna be able to handle it mostly. But if you don't have a great PC, and you don't play in single player but multiplayer, the game is really a slugfest. And this performance issue has never really been solved. They've made some updates where they've improved the performance, but to be honest, I feel like the game ran better back in 2018. Maybe it's just my memory being wrong, but that's kind of how it feels. The second biggest problem is the rate at which expansions for the game are coming out. Now, ever since the game was released back in 2016, the average rate of expansions for the game being released was 1 per year. Now, patches wise, sometimes they have patches outside of these time periods, but most of the time, an expansion releases, there's a couple of hotfixes, and that's it until next year. So there's one expansion per year, and if you're unhappy with it, oh well. And even if you are happy, I don't think one expansion per year is enough to keep a person invested into the game. So the obvious answer here would be to have expansions come out more frequently. The way expansions have worked so far for Hearts of Iron 4 is that every expansion adds 1 or 2 new mechanics to the game, and a couple of new focuses for countries. And in my opinion, they're focusing way too much on adding new mechanics rather than adding new focuses. Because the mechanics are nice, but at one point there's too many things to think about, and that's not fun. Unless you're playing purely single player, and you have all the time in the world to take care of everything that's happening. Besides, if you look at the latest expansion, it got mostly negative reviews, and in my opinion that's because it doesn't complement the gameplay that happened so far. The new resistance mechanics feel like straight up a downgrade, and the new spy system feels out of place. Both of these mechanics don't make the game better, and I feel like the majority of players wants new focus tree content. Since the release of Hearts of Iron 4, the expansions have reworked focus trees for Germany, Japan, France, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America. I'm listing the majors here because the majors are the most important, and there's still 2 majors that have not been reworked, now that it's 4 years since the release of the game. The first major is Italy, and the second is the Soviet Union. So both of these countries, since 2016, have not really been changed at all, except benefiting from some of the new mechanics that have been added to the game. And the problem with this is that when playing Italy or the Soviets, it's really noticeable that these countries have outdated focus trees compared to other majors that seem a lot more fun and have a lot more options on what to do. Now, of course, a lot of people at this point say, yeah, but there's mods. Well, I believe that even though the mods are amazing and I love playing them, most of my time in Hoi 4 was spent by playing mods. I believe that it doesn't make an excuse that the game is more playable with mods than without them. The game in its vanilla state costs a lot of money, so the vanilla content without any mods should be worth that money. At least that's what I think about it. So that's kinda where the historical multiplayer community comes in again. I believe that most of the players in it are dissatisfied with the new expansions, because every time there's new content for the game, they make mods to cut it out, or to rebalance it to be fit for multiplayer. So you have a situation where the developer of the game is focused on adding these new mechanics while ignoring what people truly want. The focus is on single player, but the single player, in my opinion, is becoming tiring because of these new mechanics. It feels like too much work. I understand that this is supposed to be complex, and I'm okay with that. Also, I'm okay with walking away from the game and letting others that enjoy such levels of complexity enjoy them. The casual community is gonna have some problems, of course. Casual meme multiplayer games can still happen, even though the mechanics might hinder them a bit, and the hardcore community of Hoi 4 is slowly going to die, in my opinion. It's already happening, many can agree with me. It's basically the fact that every new expansion that comes out is going to make the historical multiplayer community slowly fall apart. It's already happening. Every new expansion that comes out, there's more mechanics that are modded out. And at one point, the game that the historical multiplayer community is playing is going to be completely different than the original vanilla game. So, what do I think is the future of Hoi 4? I don't really know. I just hope that Paradox does better in the future, because La Resistance was really a lackluster expansion for the game. And until then, I'm probably going to be enjoying mods, because at this point it's the only way for me to have fun with the game. Anyways, that's about it. Thank you all for watching, have a great day, and I hope you managed to pull through my slugfest of learning how to record myself talk about things. I do hope I'm getting better though. In any case, I'll experiment with some new stuff in the next video, so see ya there.